What's your passion? I'm back. I'll tell you, there was the epidemic that we had, and we all have been in our houses, and it just seems like everybody's getting out and about more. So we are so glad that things are better, and we still have to be careful, don't we? That's just the way it is. Well, I am so excited because it just happened with the timing of this. I have some dear friends that I have known for many years, and it's Dick and Pam happened to have lived in the Arcadia area many years ago. Now, Pam, we were talking about this when we were coming.
Yes.
What did we say? How many years it has been?
It's unfortunately more than 40 years ago. So I think I moved to Arcadia in around 1980 and left probably around 1983.
So that was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
That's it. Now, I know you're not from here, but you did tell that little story because Dick and Pam, we'll get into what we're talking about here today, but it is an interesting story that you said that you've done TV and you guys have done radio things and they like to act and all that other stuff, so you're not scared to be on TV.
No. Pam and I met in Massachusetts, and we were both part of a theater company. We called ourselves the West County Players, and we did a lot of comedy theater and had a lot of fun, and that's where we became friends and met, and eventually we got together, and we've been together now for, got to be careful here, Pam.
Get it right.
Well, since about 2000. Yeah.
That's many years.
That's many
already
years.
When you think about it. I mean, it's just like that time goes so fast.
It does.
So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
Where do you want to start and who wants to start? And you can see on the table here, there's 4 books. So let's just move forward, and who wants to go first? And we can take turns and go back and forth.
Actually, there are 5 books.
Oh, 5 books?
Yeah, 5 books.
How did I miss out on one?
One of them was just published, recently.
Then
so.
that's why.
Yeah.
All right. Well, fire away.
Well, we've moved around a lot, and we've had different jobs, but lately we're retired. One of the things we did for a while, for 5 years, we ran a bed and breakfast in Virginia, and one of our books is called Notes from an Innkeeper's Journal. And that was the first book that we sort of did together, though it has my name on it because I did much of the writing, but Pam contributed considerably. And so once we did that, it didn't seem all that unusual to be able to publish a book, and we just started writing down things that we wanted to get on paper.
Right. And Dick has a background in English and teaching English things, and he owned a newspaper, and he was an editor of a magazine, and so he's kind of the writer in this couple and brought me along. So now I've started writing. So
it's awesome. It's really, really wonderful. What a nice shared thing. I mean, you guys have done a lot of different things that you have mutual interests in.
Yeah, we both like to travel, and we've done a lot of that. And we enjoyed the bed and breakfast a lot. We did that for 5 years. Then we moved to Maine, where we got very involved in the community. We just contributed a lot to a small town, about 900 people.
That's small.
That's pretty small,
Yeah.
yeah. But we liked it up there. We finally moved to Illinois, where we're living now, Carbondale, where the University of Southern Illinois is. And that's where I graduated. I got a master's degree there, and I hesitate to tell you, but it was 1968.
Now we can start doing the math.
Do the math, yeah. And I taught at Kaskaskia College, community college, for 16 years, and then eventually moved to New England, where eventually I met Pam.
Aha. And how about you, Pam? What's your background and other experience? Because you were here in Arcadia, but you weren't born and raised here.
No. I was originally from Nebraska, but my family moved around a lot for my dad's job. So I did most of grade school in Oklahoma City, most of high school in Kansas City, finished high school in New Jersey.
Oh, I don't think I ever knew that.
Went to college in Pennsylvania, then moved with my first husband from Philadelphia to the Pittsburgh area, then out to Arcadia for 3 years. And then we decided we needed to be back closer to his family, so we moved back to the East Coast and lived in Massachusetts, where we raised our kids in Western Massachusetts for a number of years. And then divorce happened, and then once I got together with Dick, we went from Massachusetts to Nashville, Tennessee, because Dick got a job as an editor of a magazine there. And we were there for 3 years, and then we decided that we needed to do something different, and we bought the bed and breakfast in Virginia, and we were there for 5 years.
And that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I know that I got to come to that place too.
You do, yeah, you visited.
That
Yes.
was so fun.
You and Gretchen
So-
and Steve.
Maybe it's time
Not
to
Steve.
show the
You want
book that you
to
wrote
start
about the
talking
inn.
about that? That'd be
Sure.
wonderful.
I don't know how well you can see that, but this is called Notes from an Innkeeper's Journal. And when we bought the bed and breakfast, we decided to keep notes. We decided to keep a journal, in fact. So we would write down interesting experiences, notes about guests, funny things that happened, sometimes not so funny things that happened, and we wrote them down. And then finally, in year 4, when we decided to sell the inn, and maybe a little bit before that, I started writing the book. I would get an odd half hour or so, and I would go up onto the 3rd floor and work a little bit. And, and the book got published just before we sold the inn.
Wow,
Yeah.
you talk about timing. How did that happen that it just kind of...
Just accident. The inn had been for sale for about 1.5 years, 2 years. We'd wanted to go somewhere else, be closer to Pam's family, and we were just writing the book, and it
ended.
And it ended, yeah. Just about a month after this was published, somebody made an offer on the inn, and we sold it.
Wow. Just like that.
Well, this book is a cheerful, happy book about innkeeping because we both loved it. We absolutely loved innkeeping in many, many ways. There are some experiences that people might not find all that, well, people always used to say, oh, you have a wonderful life here. Isn't it great? We're going to go out for today. What are you two going to do? Well, we're going to make beds, we're going to clean house, we're going to prepare dinner, we're going to... And so that's in the book too. And so when the people said they were going to buy the inn, they said, well, we're going to go back to our hotel, we're going to make a decision, but I understand you wrote a book. I said, yeah. I said, I'd like to buy one and read it. And I thought, we're probably not going to sell the inn.
This is it.
because they'll see all the hard parts of running an inn in that book.
So they came back in the morning and they bought the inn. And I said, did you read the book? He said, oh, yeah. I said, and it wasn't discouraged? He said, nah. I said, it's just life. He said, it sounds like you guys are having fun.
And that's how wonderful you enjoyed having fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, the only thing we wish is that maybe the last chapter of the book could be how to sell an inn, because people often ask us questions about that, and of course that's not in the book because we hadn't sold the inn yet. But the book was used a lot in Professional Innkeepers Association. They would often give it or sell it to aspiring innkeepers so that they kind of got the idea of what it really was like, some of the funny
Which is good.
and not so fun stories of running an inn, not the nitty gritty of how many towels you're going to need to buy and that kind of thing. There are a lot of books like that, but this book kind of tells the everyday stories of what it's like to have strangers enter your house every day and sleep there, and you get to know them.
How did that feel? Was it
It
always
was-
easy, or was there? What was that
It was
like?
mostly wonderful. It really it was. I think people that go to bed and breakfasts know that they're going to have somewhat of a personal experience. So they're the kind of people that are sociable and want to meet other people. And that was the fun part for us, was meeting different people and finding out about their jobs, what they did, where they come from, just getting to know them. And many people came back time and time again to the inn for when they'd have a weekend that they wanted to get away. They'd come and stay there again. So that was nice. And we we held weddings there, so that was always
Oh,
fun.
that would be fun.
I personally married 4 couples there.
You did.
They wanted to get married at the end. They didn't want a preacher, and so I'd get a license and I'd marry them.
Are you a master of the universe? Because they do have that online training you can do for.
No. No, as a matter of fact, I had to put down a $500 deposit to make sure that I turned in the wedding papers. But I got my money back if I filled out the right form.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, the first couple wanted a Buddhist priest. They were Buddhists, and they'd already stayed with us once. And they said, we'd like to get married there. And do you know if there's a Buddhist priest in the area? Well, the area was very rural in Virginia, and it was like, no, I don't think, no. But we could find you a minister. And they said, well, no, that's not good. And then they asked Dick if he would marry them. So you did.
So I did, and married 3 other couples. We were fairly close to Washington, D.C., and so we would get a lot of really interesting people coming down who had jobs in government or were working in some unique agency and so on. Things would happen at the breakfast table sometimes. Just one quick little anecdote. One woman, we were going around the table, what are you doing? What are you doing? And this got around this one woman, she said, well, I work for the CIA.
Oh.
And somebody said,
wow.
Somebody said, what do you do? And she says, I put out contracts. And everybody sort of did this. She said, no, not those kind of contracts. Building contracts.
Oh, I bet everybody was kind of,
Well, I have a feeling that she'd been through that routine before. But at any rate, it made for a funny little moment at breakfast. Yeah.
So do you want to read something from that book? Do you have something picked out?
I was going to read that little anecdote. What else do I have here? Oh, yeah, this one. What each chapter kind of starts out in a general sort of way, a noble occupation, escape from corporate America, learning to be innkeepers, a day in the life of an innkeeper, and so on. And then after that sort of introductory pages, then we put little notes, little anecdotes that happened. This is a very short one, but this is one of my favorites in a way.
Sure, that's what we like.
An innkeeper we know complained to us the other day about an annoying phone call he'd gotten. A lady called and wanted to know how the foliage season was progressing in our area, he grumbled. She didn't ask a thing about our inn and obviously had no intention of booking a room, just wanted to know how the leaves were doing. People don't seem to mind at all that they're wasting my time, and on my 800 number no less. I suppose he had a point, but I would have welcomed the call and been charmed by the query. In fact, for 4 years now, a woman has called us every June to ask if the rhododendrons are blooming yet in Goshen Pass. She's never asked the price for a room or given any indication she might come and stay with us someday. But I enjoy answering her questions and talking with her about the flowers and the trees along the Maury River. Her annual calls, like crocuses in the spring or geese honking their way north, have come to be a sign that summer is in the offing.
Oh, that's a nice little twist that you have there. That does seem awfully funny that she would call.
Every spring. Never missed once.
Yeah. There's all sorts of people, and of course when you work with the public, people that work with the public realize that you're going to have all kinds and all sorts of stories to tell. So
I bet.
That's what made it fun.
Thinking as you're talking about working with the public, how much do you think with the different places that you lived and the different kinds of things that you did attributed to the success at the end? And because you had that such a broad range of experiences, and between the two of you combined, it's like, whoa, that's awesome.
Yeah, maybe that could be.
You think that helped?
But we also just like to meet people and learn about them, so that was a perfect place for that.
We were very hands-on. When we were shopping for an inn, occasionally, and we'd go to the inn we were thinking of buying, and we'd book a room. And sometimes the innkeeper would meet you at the door, give you a very brief tour, tell you what time breakfast is, and disappear.
Oh.
You wouldn't see them again.
Oh.
We would give them a tour. We'd ask them if they needed help. We would go down to the den and start a fire for them. We would tell them where the brownies are and help, and we'd make them some coffee, and we'd go out at night and talk to them. And so we were very, very hands-on.
Oh, that's...
Because we like people.
And they saw that and they loved
Probably.
that. People loved that, didn't they?
Yeah. It was nice. It was fun.
Yeah, we increased the occupancy rate of our inn by more than 15% from the time we bought it to the time we sold it.
That's
And a lot of that was
substantial.
return people. Yeah.
It's very substantial.
But then again, why did we sell it?
Well, yeah, that'd be a question. That's,
Because it is just a strange lifestyle we lived there. So it was our home and our things were all around everywhere. And every once in a while I'd be laying in bed and I'd think, this is kind of a strange lifestyle. I'm laying in bed, I need to get up early to feed 10 people, and they're all asleep in rooms below me, and I don't really know any of them, and I've invited them into my house. It just did seem strange, plus all the work there is. We did most of our own cleaning and all of our own cooking and all of our own gardening and maintenance, because it was small. It wasn't, a 5-room inn is just about break even for an inn.
Oh, okay.
If you really want to make money, you need to buy a bigger inn than that and have more money to start out with to be able to buy that bigger inn. So for us, it was a mom and pop kind of situation where we did most of our own work, and it got to be harder the older we were getting.
I bet. That's very labor intensive.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And we were in a part of Virginia in the Appalachian chain where we had a lot of people that would come from the Washington, D.C. area, from the Richmond and Virginia Beach area. So we had very few days that we had no one in the house at all.
Oh, that'd be harder.
And that's hard because you don't really ever get a break. And
did you get a vacation ever?
We did. We would hire inn sitters.
How did that go?
Well, okay, but they didn't run the inn as well as we did, we thought. And we would sometimes get complaints, not bad ones, but we didn't feel real comfortable with that. So we never did it well, we did go to Wales once and we were gone 10 days and we had an inn sitter for that. But it went okay, but we didn't really enjoy doing that. A little scary.
Yeah, it was like leaving your kids with a babysitter. You're kind of a little nervous the whole time you're gone. And
that's a good comparison.
Yeah.
No one does anything to your standard,
Right.
And so when you get someone in, it's like, well, I can see how
Our way's
that
the
would
right
be.
way, and if you don't do it our way. Yeah.
And I had a son who had moved to Maine, and he and his wife were going to start having children. So that was another big thing to let's move to Maine and be close to these new grandkids that are coming. So that's what we did. Yeah. And that's how we ended up in Maine.
That's
a
how you
place
ended
neither
up
of
in
us
Maine.
had ever lived, but it was a great place to live too. So
Yeah, and then I mean, if I would have had my dithers about me, and then maybe there's a way to do this somehow. I do have some of those pictures of the Hummingbird Inn that would have been nice to have brought along. Now, do you have?
I think there's a drawing
I've
in the
read
front
your
of
books,
this.
not the last two you did.
this is really small.
Yeah.
It's not going to work.
Is it really, really
Yeah,
small?
it's really small.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Probably,
No,
yeah.
there's no way they can see it.
It was
No,
it was
that's too bad. But
6,500 square feet. There were 16 rooms in the whole house.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
A lot of bathrooms.
5 guest rooms, each with their own bathroom. The whole house altogether had 7.5 bathrooms. So it was a big place.
oh my, when I think about cleaning, 7.5.
But another
I'm
real,
sorry, I can't, okay, I'm done, but
another really fun thing though about having it, when you mentioned that you have pictures from there, every once in a while, if we knew it was a slow season, we would close the inn for a week, and we would invite old friends to come, and that's how you ended up
we
coming.
got coming there.
Yes.
Oh, we had
It
so
was
much
so
fun.
because everybody had their own room, their own
Your own
bathroom.
bath, your own shower.
We just had a huge dining room to hang out in, a huge kitchen to all be cooking and dancing around.
And we did. And a lot of other to be had. A lot of drinking was flowing freely.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. We built a fire, I think, when you were there. I'm not sure when you were there, but
Yes.
the fire in that big old beamed room. That
Yeah.
room had been built in 1790 something, and the inn had grown up around that, so it was quite an old building.
1790.
That one room.
The one room. So, I mean, the one room was 1790, but then that was like a house that someone lived in.
It was,
How
it was
was
some
that?
kind of
What
a
was that?
store. I can't remember exactly
It
what
was
was
a
being
store,
sold.
yeah.
Store.
Yeah. And were you there, Becky, the time that we had the group of we call them the Arcadia Gang was there?
The Arcadia Gang, a
And
lot.
a guy came to the front door and his car had broken down, and it was at the local gas station, and they couldn't get parts until Monday. And he wanted to know if we had a room to rent, and we didn't because the place was filled with our friends. But we knew there was nowhere else for him to go. So we said, well, we'd let you sleep on the couch in the living room if that's okay with you. And he said, sure. You weren't there that time, I guess.
I don't think I remember that. That might, because you've had different groups of
Yeah,
our
we have.
groups of friends.
Yeah.
We've had.
But he stayed for the weekend, got along fine with all of our friends, just hung out with us, helped us cook.
Peeled potatoes one time for dinner, yeah.
Right, it was great. And then he took off on Monday is when everybody else took off. So
Well, that had to be the fun of it because no day was the same.
No.
And I'm even trying to remember saying that. How many days did we stay there when our groups came?
I would guess it was
we?
just a few days, like maybe 3
days.
nights.
Yeah.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
truly we couldn't. It probably wasn't over a weekend either because weekends are the
No,
busiest
because
time.
that's when you were busy.
And that's
so
when
it
we
had to
could
be
make our
during the
money.
week.
So it had to be during the week.
Yeah.
So yeah, it
That
was great
was-
though. And we
that
had
was
old
fun.
friends of Dick's come a couple of times, and then we had family come sometimes.
One thing about our lives being separate for so long and then joining is that she has this circle of friends, which includes you, and I have a
That's
circle of
such
friends.
a deal.
I have a circle of friends, which include a number of people who live in Carbondale I went to graduate school with. So when we got together and got married, these two groups of friends came right along with us. You've adopted me, they've
Yes.
adopted her.
Isn't that wonderful? That's so fun.
It is.
It's double the fun, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It is wonderful.
Ah, I love that. Friendships.
Yeah, it is. So then we went to Maine, and
Yes.
I had owned a newspaper for a while in Massachusetts, and so I couldn't. I had also worked for 10 years as a freelance writer, writing for magazines and stuff. So I was still doing that when we went to Maine, and I got a job writing columns for the local newspaper. At any rate, we were at a town meeting one day, and a woman comes up and says, "Are you the writer?" And I said, "Well, I write things." And she said, "I got this manuscript." I thought, "Oh, yeah, I've gotten that before."
That's it.
And I said, "And what is it?" She said, "Well, my dad wrote it during right after World War II, and I've been trying to get it published for 50 years." She said, "Nobody seems
Oh,
interested."
that's a long
Yeah.
time.
And she said, "Would you look at it?" So I took it home and read it, and wow. Well, I'm a World War II fan, and I thought, well, maybe I better have Pam read this too. And then Pam read it.
So I read it, and I'm not a war fan, but it was more of an adventure story than a war story. And it was not particularly well written, but the stories were really great.
Stories were wonderful.
That's what really shone then, didn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Yeah.
And it deserved to be a book. It really did.
So it needed a little editing, and it needed, I had to do some research because there were things in there they left sort of vague and not very clear. And so I worked on it for 6 months. And it's called Hell is So Green. And eventually, there you go. Eventually, a publishing company bought it. They gave me an advance to finish the book. And it's about Lieutenant Bill Diebold, who was stationed in India, and he jumped out of airplanes into the Burmese jungle to rescue pilots whose planes had gone down while they were flying over the hump of the Himalayas to deliver supplies to China. He would jump into the jungle, find the downed pilots, and get them out of the jungle and save their lives.
I can't imagine.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, it was like I say, it was a heck of a story.
It was an
I
adventure
bet it
story.
is. I've got to
Yeah.
read that one because I didn't even know the story about that story.
Or a lot of people, when people think of World War II, they think of Japan and they think of
Yes.
Europe. Well, this was mainly about the Chinese fighting the Japanese during World War II and the supplies over the hump. And it's called Hell is So Green because it takes place, a lot of it takes place in the jungles of Burma. Wow.
And that was his title for it too. Was Bill Diebold's title.
That was his title. So I got a publishing company bought the book. It was selected as a military history book club book of the month selection.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Who would have guessed when that lady walked in and how that would have evolved?
Oh yeah,
Right.
and she was so
thrilled.
happy. And you know, she had been the oldest daughter of Bill Diebold, and he had
Four
he had
daughters.
4 girls, and so she remembered him. But when he came back from the war, he drank quite heavily. He had a real
Who
problem.
wouldn't?
And his
Oh, my
wife
goodness
divorced
sakes.
him. And the girls were told, your dad's no good, he can't hold down a job, he's just drunk all the time. So the only daughter that still always thought of daddy was Penelope, his daughter, who we had met in Maine. And she wanted this book to be published, and the other girls didn't want to have anything to do with it at all.
Really?
I wrote asking for photographs and they wouldn't send them to me. They said, we don't want to hear anything about our dad. Leave us alone.
Oh no, that's just so sad.
But
But
the book came out. It sold very, very well. And eventually, all 3 girls, the ones that had rejected dad,
yes.
wrote me letters and said, thank you for rehabilitating our dad. We had no idea what he went through. We now understand why he was the way he was, and thank you.
isn't that heartwarming?
Yeah,
It is because I never anticipated they would have done that.
they did.
Not with their reaction that they weren't even helping you with some pictures.
Well, no,
or
they had
anything.
pictures, and so the book it only has one picture, and that was one Penelope gave me. I wish I'd gotten those pictures; it would have made a better book, but now it's too, what.
But that's okay.
Yeah,
I mean, this is what you always say, pictures are worth 1,000 words, but this is kind of in reverse. That you don't have the pictures, but that heartwarming story about the other daughters. Oh my.
And then after it was published, Dick got calls, a couple of calls at least, from people who said, my dad is in a nursing home and he was working in the Burma theater during World War II, and I got your book and I read it to him and he cried and he was so happy. And just a lot of stories like that came out.
Yeah, my dad was one of the people flying the airplanes who would drop supplies or that Bill jumped out of, and so on.
Yeah. So it was,
My goodness sakes, that's just exciting.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about that. I know that you mentioned it before we came here, but I had no idea.
They put my name on the cover. I mean, it's Bill's
They
book. It's
did.
Lieutenant Diebold's book, but I wrote the introduction and afterward, so they gave me some credit there. But this one's, I'm not sure how many editions this has gone through, but there was a hardback and then the paperback, so at least 2 editions, I know. And this one's still available on
eBay or
Amazon.
Amazon?
Yeah.
Amazon.
Oh boy, I'm gonna have to get that. Well, Steve already said. I think he goes, I gotta get one of those.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's
that
me.
brings us to,
Yes.
we're living in Phillips, Maine, this little town of 900 people, and there's a trail near our house called the Flyrod Crosby Trail. So I said, well, who is Flyrod Crosby? And a lot of people that lived in Phillips didn't know. Others knew, but they said she was a woman. I think she lived around here. I don't know. She had something to do with the area. They named a trail after her. I thought, okay. So
Interesting.
I went to the Historical Society. They had a lot more information about her. And they said, well, there's a book been written if you're interested, and you can get it from the Maine State Museum. So I got that book. and it was very detailed. They had done lots of research, but not a book that most people are going to pick up and read. So I started thinking, this woman, she was a journalist back in the late 1800s. She was a fisher, a hunter. She opened up fishing and hunting to women. She helped create the Maine Guide program, which is still in existence today. She was given the first Maine Guide license. She worked for the Maine Central Railroad. She helped set up exhibits at Madison Square Garden in New York City and Boston about the state of Maine. She marketed the state of Maine. She came up with the slogan that the state of Maine used for many years about playground of the nation, Maine, playground of the nation, to try to get people up to do the sporting things that you can do in Maine. And I thought, boy, it would be so nice if someone wrote a more accessible book, in particular a children's book, for the local people to know who Fly Rod Crosby was, because you know how it is when children grow up in these rural areas and they feel like, oh, I'm never going to get out of here, and this is all.
Yes.
And I wanted them to know they could be proud of where they lived and where they grew up, because you can become whatever you want to become if you work hard enough, and if you're lucky, but still. So I hoped that that would happen, and the years were going by, and nobody was writing this book. So finally I thought, I can do this. So I sat down and I wrote a children's book, but I wanted it to be published. Or published, but I wanted it to be illustrated, and I am not an illustrator. So I found a woman who lives in Portland, Maine, named Heidi Kendrick, and she was able to do all the illustrations for me. And this is my book, Cornelia Fly Rod Crosby, Champion of Maine. The cover of it is the river that ran right behind our house when we lived in Maine, and the rocks there were our beach on the river.
There was a Class 3 rapid just beyond that stone, which I call Moby Rock because I thought it looked like a whale.
Oh,
and it's
And you
hard.
can see that rapid outside our window.
It's hard to see it, but I had our granddaughter pose. I'm on the wrong side. Pose up on the rock, holding her arm out, so that when I found the illustrator, I could say, "This is how big the rock is compared to a little girl."
how old was she at the time when she did that?
She was probably about 9.
Oh, perfect age when you think about.
And Heidi's a wonderful illustrator, and so it's fully illustrated book completely throughout. It has a lot of words because I wanted to tell all of Fly Rod's story. Of course, her childhood, I had to make up a lot of it. We know when she was born and when her parents died and when her brother died and that kind of thing, but we didn't know a lot about her.
She left no letters. There
Yeah,
was
she
very
didn't.
little about
Oh,
it. It turned
isn't
out, though,
that
that
a shame?
she had been born in and lived in the same town we did, right across the river.
Oh, goodness sakes.
And her house is still standing
Still
there.
there.
And she was born in 1864, and she was quite the woman. Yeah.
1880s, 1890s, can you imagine accomplishing all that then?
No.
Yeah.
Now, was she ever married or?
Never married, never
just
had
a
children.
Single. Oh my goodness.
Her
sakes.
brother, she had tuberculosis when she was a child, and so did her brother, so did her dad. Her dad died when she was a toddler. Her brother died when he was 17, I think. And so she was fully expected not to live very long. But my theory is that she got out in the fresh air, which is what doctors told you to do then. And that's how she came to have a love for the Maine woods and the flora and fauna of Maine. And one neat thing happened when Heidi and I got this book written. I tried to get publishers to publish it, and they said there are too many words in this book to be a children's book.
They told you that.
Yes.
That's interesting.
An illustrated children's book. So I said, well, we'll publish it ourselves, and we will publish it in the state of Maine. So we did. And right before it was ready to come out, I thought, often on books you'll have some author, Stephen King or somebody will say, "Oh, this is a wonderful book," and I thought we should have done something like that, and we didn't do it. And I had sent the manuscript to a woman named Janet Mills, who was then governor. No, she hadn't become governor of Maine when I first sent her the manuscript. Because she was from the Phillips area. She had grown up there, and I wanted her to see the manuscript.
Yes.
So when we were almost ready to publish this, I thought, I wonder if Janet Mills would write something for the back of it. So I called the State House, her office, and I said,
"You a brave woman, you."
I said, "Janet Mills has my manuscript. Could you ask her if she would write a few words for the back? All it has to be is, 'This is a great book, Janet Mills,' something like that." And they said, "Well, we don't know. Let us ask Governor Mills," because she was governor by then. And they called back and they said, "She doesn't have the manuscript anymore. Could you send her another book?" And I said, "No, it's Friday. This is being published on Monday." So I'll email her the manuscript again. So they said, great. So they did. And Monday morning they called me and they said, "We're emailing you her quote. So I would like to read her quote.
Read the quote.
Because I'm pretty proud of this.
Oh,
so.
Of course. Why wouldn't
She
you
wrote,
be?
"Pam Matthews' words in Heidi Kendrick's illustrations have us fishing right alongside Cornelia Flyrod Crosby, healed by Maine's fresh mountain air and river streams, and knowing, because Cornelia taught us how, that our lives are what we make of them. Let all children know Maine as the playground of the nation, and like Cornelia, work to preserve and protect it for generations to come. Janet T. Mills, Governor of Maine."
Also, about that
She
time,
had to think about that for a while. I mean, that
Yeah.
was wow.
Well, and I knew she loved Cornelia Flyrod Crosby because in her inauguration speech, she had mentioned her twice.
Oh,
So I knew I had her. I
Perfect.
just had to get her to write something.
now let me add that Pam, after the book was published,
yes.
people, particularly from schools, would ask her to come and talk about Flyrod Crosby. So in order to make it more interesting, she made herself a Flyrod Crosby outfit based on pictures, actual pictures that were taken of Flyrod back in her day, and it's a marvelous costume. All of, long skirt, the vest.
Did you
the,
make these?
The mutton,
Yes.
the mutton
Oh,
sleeve.
Pam.
Oh, it was wonderful, and she
I
has
thought
it still.
so.
She has it still, and
So
where is it?
I've gone to a lot of schools, historical societies, libraries, festivals, and given talks. And I've even been doing it in Illinois since we live
How fun.
there, which is kind of
Oh,
strange.
it's just
but
delightful. But still, it's wonderful. That's
Yeah.
great.
yeah.
You
it's
have
been
that
fun.
dress, you cannot not wear it.
Well, that's true. And it's so uncomfortable that.
Is it? Is it? Does it have like a high collar
Oh, yeah, it has
on
a high collar. And then she always wore a little fly because she was a fly fisherman.
Yeah.
So she always had a little fly here, and then it has the big mutton sleeves that get skinny down here.
Oh, wow.
And then all the way to the floor, and the tight little waist with the belt,
Wow.
big boots so she could be out fishing.
So was she always wearing skirts, or did she do a man pant thing?
No, well, women did not do pants
Forbidden.
then. She did do hooks and eyes on her skirt so she could pull it up to just below her knee. And she would, if she was going to get into a canoe, she would do that, or if she was going to be traipsing through the woods to hunt, she would do that. But when she came into camp and met the men in camp, she would always let the skirt down before she saw them because they might have seen her
Leg or
shin.
something. Well, heaven forbid that. You can't have that.
She had her skirt hoisted, I think, for demonstration purposes at one of the expositions, New York or Boston or someplace.
It was New York,
And-
Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, Madison Square Garden.
Oh.
And it was attracting a lot of stuff. A lot of people coming to see both the exhibit and this woman whose ankles.
the short
Oh,
skirt.
that was a big.
Because at that point, that was the latest Paris fashion. And Spalding Sportswear Company had sent her this outfit that was the latest Paris fashion, but it was below the knee. just below the knee, and that was pretty shocking in New York City at that time.
But one of the people who came to see her was Annie Oakley, who was also at the exposition. Annie Oakley and Fly-Rod Crosby, Cornelia Crosby, became friends, and Annie Oakley came up to Phillips area and did some shooting contests and outshot all the men, I think. And
Oh, I bet she did.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness sakes.
So
Who
that's
would
my
think,
book.
because that the town that you were living in was not big.
No.
I mean, you know, when you think about the brush of greatness, and then look at all this wonderful things that happened.
Yeah.
And you made it happen. I bet they have that. I bet there's posters and books and things all over
Actually,
in that community.
I feel like I've done a lot, because now there's a statue of Cornelia at the Maine State Sports Museum or something.
See?
A lot of people now know who she is, because I get calls from people a lot asking about her. So I feel good about that.
Oh, you should feel good about that. It's awesome. Yay.
So that's probably one book in my life that I will do. But Dick, then when we moved to Illinois and he retired for good.
Because you were then, you then were in Maine for how long? And then
We were in Maine for 11 years.
Okay.
And then we were getting, my son his job had changed, so they had left Maine with the grandkids.
Unfortunate.
I know.
Darn.
And
That's
then
laid
we were there a
plans.
few more years because we really loved Maine. But we just realized it was getting harder and harder to move all that snow every winter.
a lot of stuff.
We know we get snow, but the snow that you got, it was even more than what we get here.
Yeah,
I mean, it really is. I think didn't you guys have to do tunnels out to your car?
Well, we had
Nearly,
more
yeah.
snow than you get here,
Yeah.
but it gets colder here. It doesn't get that cold in Maine, I think probably because of the ocean.
yeah, it's tempered that way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that makes
it
a
doesn't get
difference.
that cold. It's not usually
But
below
you get
zero
all that
very often.
moisture and snows.
We also had to, because our house was built in 1835, the one we lived in Maine, and it was a lovely old house. We loved it. Unfortunately, the bathroom was at the one end of the house, the bedroom at the other, because that had been added in the 1970s.
Of course.
But whatever, we loved that house and the view and all of that. But we had to rake the snow off the roof because the house was so old. Had we not done that, the roof would
The
have
roof
collapsed.
could collapse.
And so we get a foot or two of snow up there, and we'd be out there with this long pole raking snow off the roof. So finally we decided to.
Enough is enough, right?
Yeah,
That labor-intensive stuff.
yeah. Yeah, and I'm approaching, I don't know, 110, 120, whatever.
Oh, no, you're not that old, but
No, but I was beginning to feel.
you're feeling, your body felt that
Yeah.
rather than,
Yeah. So we decided to get away from that.
Yeah, come back to the Midwest. We didn't want to go to Florida. And like Dick had said earlier, we had friends in the southern Illinois, in Carbondale, Illinois, where he had gone to school. So we just thought, let's go to Carbondale. It's actually fairly far south. It's about 6 hours south of Chicago.
it's really surprising how far south that is. I'm
Yes.
always like, whoa, that's pretty far south. I mean, it's woo.
And they have a big university, SIU, there, which is great because it's not a huge city, but it certainly is much, much bigger than Phillips, Maine. So we have everything we want, restaurants and stores, and the university with a lot of activity around that, so that's nice.
That's got to be a very different kind of lifestyle compared to what you had.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my,
Yeah.
totally different.
Well, we had one little cafe in Phillips and a grocery store, and that was and a post office. That was it. We didn't have much of anything. We didn't have a bank. We didn't have a hardware store. We didn't have so everything was like 20 or 30 miles away, and then you had to drive on these winter roads, and our cars were rusting out because of all the salt they put on the road. So now we're in Carbondale, and life is easier. And a lot more
Easier.
options on where we can go eat, etc.
Oh, that's important. And connecting with old friends.
Yes.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, we can drive here now.
Isn't that nice?
Plus the time. Now that
Yes.
once we left Phillips and dropped so many of the community, we're still involved a little bit in Carbondale, but dropped out of so many things we were doing, I had more time to write. And so I wrote another book.
Well, tell us about that other book. I mean, it just keeps coming and coming.
Yeah. This one is, here, I'll show you the picture. There's a picture, you can see there are two backpackers there. I'm the one with the big pack, and my son Kermit is the one with the little pack.
I love that name, Kermit.
Yeah, so I used to take him backpacking all the time with me in Southern Illinois when I was teaching at Kaskaskia College. In fact, I offered a backpacking class. But at any rate, the book is called Ain't Good for a Pup to Run with the Dogs.
That's
Now,
so
if you're from
clever.
the South, you know what that means. Maybe if you're not from the South, you know what that means. But that was an expression of my dad's. And this book is dedicated to him because my dad was, well, very briefly, Mark Twain had this thing he used to say. He says, when I was 17, I thought my dad was not very bright. He seemed to me kind of dumb, didn't seem to know very much. And then I got to be 21 and 22, and I came back home, and my dad seemed to have gotten a lot smarter. And I think that happened to me. My dad never finished the 7th grade. I thought he was just a hillbilly, and I was a sophisticated college graduate and all that. And I misjudged him. I confused intelligence with education.
Ooh,
He was a
that's
very
bad.
intelligent man.
Yeah,
And
easy to do, but not good, right?
Yeah, you don't have to go to college to
Oh
be
no!
smart.
Oh no! 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 No!
And he was very generous. And I don't mean money. I mean generous in the way he raised my brother and me. He let us do things that most parents wouldn't let. He let my brother and me ride mules down into the Grand Canyon when I was 14 and my brother was 16.
Oh.
Without him. We went down, of course, with the Wranglers, but I mean, still.
Still,
How many parents would do that?
I know. Oh, that was very brave of him.
And so on. He
And
would-
letting you go, have these adventures. It's wonderful.
Yeah. And he did that in a lot of ways. And so I wanted to write a book about, it's a sort of a memoir. It's about him largely, but you can't write a family history without making it autobiographical. You just can't do it. You're part of the story.
Right. You're part of the story. It's there.
Yeah. And so I wrote this book, and unfortunately my father had died, and so he doesn't
Get to
he didn't get to see
enjoy
it.
the.
Yeah, but I think before he died, I had ample opportunity to show him how much respect I had learned to have for him over the years. It took me a while, but I eventually recognized what a remarkable man he was, and thus I wrote a book.
That's so cool.
So
Did you have a little thing in there, especially hit your heartstrings that you wanted to share? Did you have a marker in there? I know you did in another one, those other two, but maybe a highlight of something.
well, very
that
briefly,
was,
the
yeah.
opening chapter. I talk about my dad was he came to Illinois during the war and got a job there, and I was born in Chicago, but he was from Tennessee, didn't have an education. He loved to hunt. When we moved downstate, he brought his dogs with him, and he would go out raccoon hunting. And I would go out with him, and he had a bunch of other friends from Tennessee who would also do that. And so we would go out in the woods, and you let the dogs loose, and you listen to their bark, and you can tell what they're up to out there in the woods. And while you're waiting for them to find a raccoon, they'd light a fire, and they would pass a whiskey bottle around. And a whiskey bottle would go around, and somebody'd hand it to me, and they'd say, Dick, hand this on to Jake, would you? And so,
yeah,
I'd
who
hand
took
it
a
on to
little swig?
Well,
You
I
had
did
to.
after the third or fourth trip. I wonder what this tastes like. I think I took 3 swigs that night, and then somebody said, "Well, Bob, I think the dogs got onto a trail. I think we better put out this fire and go run them down." And so we put out the fire, and somebody put the bottle in the pocket, and we start off through the woods. And Dad, I'm bumping into trees. I'm falling down, and
Yeah.
I'm having so my dad comes back and he leans over me and says, "Boy, what's wrong with you? You got eyes like an owl." Oh no, you wouldn't have been hitting that bottle as it went by, would you? And I just looked at him and he said, "Ain't good for a pup to run with the dogs."
Oh.
So, in a little bit more
love
detail,
that.
that's the story.
I love
That's
that.
the story that opens the book. Yeah.
Well, that really hits the heart of the kind of guy your dad was,
He was-
coming up with a
He didn't
statement
scold me.
like that.
He didn't scold me. He didn't say, "Don't ever do that again." But it
You
was-
knew.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
If you
Oh,
were
I knew.
humping in trees and everything like that, it was like, oh, this isn't very fun.
Yeah. No way did I try that again. No. No. But he was sometimes strict. But I remember one time a bunch of friends of mine were drinking beer up in a room that we had above my dad's grocery store, and we were lining up our beer cans along the rail on the stairwell rail that you had to come up to get up to the, and we had quite a pyramid there, and we heard the back door open.
Sounds like typical.
Yeah, well, our house was behind the store, and we heard the back door open, and my dad comes walking through the storeroom, and he starts up the stairs, and we start hiding our beer and all that, and somebody banged the rail, and all these beer cans fell down on my dad. Rattle, bang, bang, crash, bang. And then you hear him coming up the stairs, crunch, crunch, crunch. And he walked in, and he stood there. Now, he was a big man. He was about 6'2", and he weighed maybe 225 pounds. And he looked at all of us for a minute. He said, "Boys, I'm going to go back over to the house. I'll be back in, I'd say half an hour." He says, "I don't want to see a can, empty or full, anywhere in this room." And he says, "And then I want you all to go home." And he says, "And if any of you need a ride, I'll take you, because I don't want any of you driving from what you've been doing up here." And he went out of the house. When he came back, it was like we were holding a prayer meeting.
I bet. Did
It
he
was.
have to take anybody home?
He did.
And
He took several of the boys home. Yeah.
Oh, that was a good thing, wasn't it?
Yeah. And the next day, I didn't hear much about it. He just told me that we needed to moderate our drinking a little bit. He said, if you don't moderate your drinking, I'm going to take that room away from you. And I said, "So we could still use it?" And he said, "Yes, but just be careful what you do." And that was that. So you can see why I learned to respect him.
Yes, yes.
Well, but-
Because he was respectful.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds like he was very, very respectful, and
Yes.
and that really makes a difference. And he didn't insult you, like, "Wow, yeah, why are you drinking?" Well, that happens all the time,
Yeah, and he understood that. Yeah.
right? And so,
Yeah.
And then you have one more book to talk about.
Yeah, we only got
you're on a
only got a few
roll,
minutes.
Dick.
only got a couple of minutes here.
That's all right.
Yeah, in 1964, I was a senior at SIU Carbondale, and with one semester to go, and I realized that I just discovered Russian novels, and I had to read them, and I made a big pile, and I said, "How can I go to school and read all these books at the same time?" I dropped out of school for the semester to read the books, and I got drafted.
Surprise! What happens?
Really, really
Who would have
dumb
thought?
thing on my part.
Oh.
Well, that was in '64, and the Gulf of Tonkin incident happened in August '64, and I was with the 1st Infantry Division in Fort Riley, Kansas for a year and a half, and at the end of that year and a half, they sent us to Vietnam. And this book, called Short, is the title. Short meaning you only have a little bit of time to go before you're out, and subtitled Reflections of a Vietnam Veteran. So, and then why I decided to write a book about that 50 years after the experience, I have no idea.
It doesn't matter. It's wonderful. You wrote it.
Yeah, I just wanted to get a few things off my chest. Nothing. I didn't suffer any serious PTSD because the war was really early on. Then casualties we had casualties, but not like later. Nowhere near like later.
Right, and war just
Yeah.
it's a tough one.
Well, it was an interesting country. When it came right down to it, I don't think I regretted my time in the service at all. I learned a lot.
That's great.
Yeah. Now, I wasn't happy being in Vietnam, and when I got back, I wasn't happy that the war was continuing, but that doesn't matter. The point is, it was an interesting experience, and it had a huge effect on my life, and so I wrote a book about it.
Isn't that wonderful? See, that just ties into what you guys are both talking about, all the life experiences
Yeah.
that you had.
Well, we've both started just now that we're retired and we have time.
Yes.
Sometimes when the feeling comes, we just sit down and write some story from our lives or about some trip we took, it's just kind of interesting when you're typing something that all of a sudden little things that happened that you didn't know you remembered come into it, or your feelings about it, or well, why am I not mentioning my mother in this? Well, she must have been there, and then oh yeah, my mom was, and then you start writing something about that. More. So it's been ostensibly to leave to our children, but then again, I feel like it's just a really nice way to spend your later years, to be reflecting on what you've done during your life, what it's meant to you, what it's meant to others. I think it's an interesting thing to do.
Yeah, Pam's been writing about she took her granddaughter to Ireland for a trip, and serious bonding between the two of them on that trip.
I'm sure.
And she's been writing that up and sharing it with the writing group that we have back in Carbondale. And you've been writing about you wrote some about your trip to Africa. You've written some about the time you and I spent in Ireland together, and so on. So she's been writing a lot of things I love it.
It's so important to write.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, I know you keep a journal, don't you?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I've had journals for 50 years, and I had this pile of all these journals, and after I got done retiring, I thought, I've got to go through all those. There's stuff I bet I need to throw away. But maybe as I go through some of that stuff, there might be something I want to keep.
I bet you will find that.
And so it's interesting because it's almost like there was a certain theme throughout all this, and then you go through and you see the crap and you just kind of go, oh, that's nothing. But yet there's stuff, it's like, oh, I wrote that. That is deep. I would share it with my husband, but my boys tend to appreciate it more. My daughter would appreciate it too. So now I have condensed all that writing that was a stack like that down to this, and now I'm ready to write a book.
Good for you.
All right,
good
do
for
it.
Yeah.
Do it.
I think we're gonna have to.
So with that, thank you. This has just been delightfully fun.
Well, thank you for inviting us.
And it's great. You're here for the visit, and then you're going, and then, if you ever want to do it again, let us know.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us, and tell again, what's your passion?